Today's video I want to continue on the notion of chess strategy, and in these videos I'm trying to cover first the most basic principles in chess. And this isn't just designed for the weak player. We're going to see an example of strong players who are choosing openings that violate many of the principles in chess, and they're going to be punished for it. And I want to talk about how king safety is as important as any other aspect of the game. So yesterday I posted a video about the importance of the center. That certainly will always hold true, but the importance of the safety of the king is of absolute importance, simply because that's where the game is won and lost. So when I was trying to think of some good examples to show you, I wanted to pick a fundamental error, a weak player and some mistakes they made, and a strong player, so we can see the two different flavors we get. And a viewer maybe a few months ago sent in a game, and I, by the way, really enjoy when people send in games. I love to see them, and I always enjoy commenting on them. So they sent in a game where I'm not quite sure whether they were playing white or black. I believe they were playing white, and they neglected to follow the general principles of castling early. And this first fight, I'm going to cover this game in a very short time, but I just want to show it for the weaker players who maybe are below 1200. You guys are just as important to the chess community as a 2500. I don't care what anybody says. Players of all levels are important, so we want to not neglect them. So this game started out d4. His opponent played d5. I do not know the ratings of these players. I would estimate it to be below 1300 or 1200. We start out with just a simple Queen's Gambit declined, and we enter into the exchange variation. And this is pretty normal by the first player. c6, the player's protecting the center. All seems pretty normal, nothing too exciting. And then this move is played, which is peculiar. I just want to take a look at the reference, see if this has been played. Yeah, one time. It's a bad move for one very simple reason. The knight wants to go to f3. So clearly a mistake of a fundamental nature. This isn't a simple tactical oversight or an error in calculation. This is just a fundamental lack of understanding. They want the center more than they care about the safety of their king. So this is why I thought this topic today was a good follow-up for yesterday's lecture. So f3, again, it's gumming up the works. It's getting in the way of the piece development. We want to develop pieces first. Control the center with pawns, but we need to develop. And black responds with an equally bizarre move, Queen a5, which is absolutely beyond my understanding as to what this move is meant to do. Of course, it pins the knight, but the knight was hardly causing any trouble. I mean, it's a naive attempt to prevent e4. But after bishop takes f6, g takes f6, black's pawn structure is completely ruined, and he has one piece developed. And it's not clear the queen wants to be on a5. But white plays e4, and black plays bishop e6. And I think in this situation, it's best not to take on e4, as I don't agree with bishop e6 per se, but I think taking on e4 is just doing what white needs, and it would allow the knight to go to f3. So bishop e6 comes, and e takes d5. So this is another clear mistake. When you have a center like this, the last thing you want to do is just start trading off all your pawns there. You want to develop your pieces around it, and at the right time either push the pawn or exchange pawns, but you simply don't want to prematurely take on d5. You'll notice these are all pawn moves and nothing's getting developed. White has completely, at least we can give black some credit here, he developed a piece, and white seems to care more about pawns than piece development. He opens his king wide open. And another bizarre move, bishop b4. This is typical for beginning players. They leave all kinds of they reach the most unusual positions because they tend to be very gutsy with giving up pieces for attacks. But okay, this is a tactical situation, and here we're left king f2, f takes e6, obvious move, and white plays knight e2, finally deciding to develop one of his pieces. Queen a5, knight f4. Another downside to the fact that the pawn is on f3. I mean, it's just taking the knight a very long time to get going because the bishop has to get out. Queen f5. Black's following the same mistakes. They're moving the same piece many times, not developing, not getting the king into the right where it needs to be, which is behind on the other side of a rook. This move, queen b3, is pretty much just it's no, I mean, it wouldn't even have crossed my mind to play this move. You're leaving a piece hanging, and this is just the game goes on a little bit, but white should lose here quite easily. And the point is, he's developing nothing, playing in the center. I guess the point I'm trying to make is you need to follow every principle in context. So I talked about the center yesterday. You need to follow those principles, but you also cannot neglect other principles, and that's what makes chess such a difficult game, because you have to understand how to balance different rules and basically create a hierarchy of importance. Which rule is more important and why? And of course the rook, this is disaster for white. He should lose. Now I want to cover a game now where white falls in for the same problem, but it's by a almost 2,500 player at the top 16 France championship. I don't know either of these players. Jean-René Koch and Yannick Gozzoli. Okay, sorry if I butchered their names. I did the best I could. White plays the very famous King's Gambit, and this move is playable, but it is risky and fights for initiative instead of solid position and king safety. And black here, the most common move is e takes f4, accepting the gambit. But I really like how Yannick played this position, where he played bishop c5. Very instructive move, allowing, of course, it's no issue if white takes on e5. That pawn's never going to stay. The point is that black already is trying to take advantage of this weak diagonal, and it's going to make white's life extremely difficult for the entire game. After move 2, white here has already got to start thinking about how he's going to get his king to a good square. And now it's castling kingside is almost completely impossible after move 2. And this is just such a clever way to play this position for black. White plays knight f3. Black follows with d6. Also noting that the take here is just not yielding anything. Knight c3, knight f6. And I wanted to cover this take just so that we can see that white really wins a pawn. I want to go through it slowly for the players. Sorry. I'm new to this system here. Takes, takes. And it seems as though white's won a pawn, and this marvelous just castles. There's no attack here. for black. He's just going to have a simple, lasting advantage in development and an advantage in piece activity. And white is in serious trouble, and I would much rather play black, even though black's a pawn down. So this is why Jean-René decided to avoid such complications and play bishop c4, realizing that that pawn capture is useless for him. Black plays knight c6. Now notice, black is not going for anything quick. He knows he has a small advantage here, and I believe black does have a small advantage for the simple reason that that bishop on c5 is terrible for white, and it's very difficult to get rid of. So let's see what white does. He plays d3, getting ready to activate some of his pieces and maybe try for a kingside castle. Black castles, great move. f5, and I gave this move a dubious mark because although it's sensible in some ways to prevent the development of the bishop on c8, it also releases the tension in the center. And yesterday I talked about when the tension in the center is released, if your opponent releases the tension in the center and you have nothing to worry about. And in this case, where the black player has a lead in, I wouldn't say a lead in development, but in some sense it is, because white is going to have a lot of trouble castling. So we can just call it a lead in development. Black needs to start looking for now some wing play to see what we can do, or a breakthrough in the center. So those are the two things. Once the center has been solidified, these are some of the ideas that black should be looking for. And let me switch the board so that we can see it from black's perspective. So f5 is played, releasing the tension on e5. So now black really, although that pawn is annoying, he's got some new ideas now that he can utilize. Black plays knight d4. And I think this move seems a little bit amateurish, actually, when I first looked at it. But it actually is sensible. The knight now is in the way. And what black wants is to be able to play c6 and eventually d5. And when that happens, he's going to accomplish his goal of playing in the center, which is what I talked about yesterday. Now, of course, white can't castle. Let me just include this here, just for giggles, or whatever you want to call it, because of the double check, game over, and he would have run out crying after that. So such a move is not possible, and white plays bishop g5, and a sensible move, trying to develop his pieces. He's clearly planning on playing kingside, castling queenside. But we're going to see now that since black is really just doing fine, playing c6, white's not going to have time to castle there either, because he's not really stronger in the center, and his king position is going to be constantly in trouble due to this dubious opening decision. a3, trying obviously for some b4 ideas, and mainly to prevent bishop b4 and pinning the knight, kind of causing destruction. And here black plays on the wing for just a few seconds, getting the bishop out of the way, and a5. The center, although not locked in a chain formation like I showed you some examples yesterday, it's still under black's control. There really is nothing white can do. He has no breaks in the center. So since white has no breaks in the center, black can play on the wings until his heart's content, and then he has the break d5 at his leisure. He is not rushing into it. And this is a beautiful example of where he could play d5, and most players would very quickly, but he's realizing that white wants to castle queenside. And so to discourage that, he's going to play on the queenside himself, because nobody can stop d5. It's eventually going to happen. So knight e2 is played, and white is trying to fight for these central squares, and black has no problem taking. And this move, it's interesting. It gives white a little bit more play now, because he now has the option to play f4 himself. But really he never gets the chance because black is too quick. Queen b6, continuing to really just get under white's skin. He's got to deal with the horrible idea that this bishop coming into f2 with some really irritating check. Knight g3. King h8. Mysterious, but not so much. Black's kind of prepared for the fact that white could take on f6 at any time. Queen e2. Now white's finally starting to prepare his queenside castle, and here black plays b4. Now just showing his hand now that since white's development has been so poor and his pieces are so poorly placed, the knight is not really well placed on g3. It's not really fighting for the center. The bishop on a2, not very a good piece. It's somewhat active, but it's not doing anything. And so now white rightly plays a4 in an attempt to not open up that side of the board. Sensible. Bishop d4, hitting the pawn. The pawn is protected. Now the point is that now the king has really nowhere to go. He's pretty much stuck in the center, and rook a7 comes. More of a prophylactic move. Well, it's not prophylactic, it's just a preparatory move, preparing possibly rook d7 at some point to power through d5. Here comes queen g2. This move is a little mysterious to me. I haven't spent an extraordinary amount of time on this position, but bishop e6 is very nice, getting rid of the key piece really that's protecting white's king is that dark squared bishop, because since the pawns are all on the light squares, all these pieces on the light squares, the dark squared complex has no real protection once this is gone. So black exchanges that piece, h6, queen, and now queen d4. So let's take stock of this position really quick. White played the king's gambit in an attempt to get an attacking position, and really what he's gotten is torture. So black's position, although not perfect yet, he's going to have time to get every piece into the game at play d5. The entire time that black's doing that, white's going to be attempting to protect his king. So it's going to be as if black's getting lots of free moves. King d2, d5. Here comes the break. At just the right time, the king is in the middle of the board, no chance of castling, and absolutely no prospect of safety. So the knight comes into e3, rook d7, rook hg1, attempting to drum up some kind of attack, but it's hopeless at this point. Rook g8, the king comes over to e2, bishop a6, one of the last pieces to get into the action, joins the party. King f2, again, the king is just making an attempt to escape. Bishop c4, beautiful move, since after the pawn capture, the knight is going to be lost, and with more dramatic effects to follow. Rook g3, rook d6. This is just a preparation against maybe after the doubling some queen takes f6 possibilities, but it's not anything that was totally necessary. Rook g1, king h7, just holding everything down. Rook h3, and as we can see, this is totally blowing smoke by the white player. Knight e8, preparing to reroute the knight. Bishop a6, a little toing and froing by each player. And finally the capture. White's opening up the position, but to his own demise, as it is made soon to follow. So again, another lecture that covers a very basic topic, but one that 2,500 players can fall victim to. So what you have to realize if you want to improve at chess is no matter how good you think you are, or how much experience you think you have, you can still fall into the same fundamental traps that a novice player would fall into because of your overconfidence and lack of meekness when it comes to analyzing your own flaws as a player. And just because your tactical ability will save you one time doesn't mean it will save you every time, and that's clearly, it turned out to be the case here. And so in addition to the last exercise, this one focused on some aspects of central play, but it mainly focused on the dangers that can happen when you don't give your king safety. And black's king, even though white has a lot of pieces over there, had nothing to worry about. There was no chance of an attack since white's king was so poorly placed. So I hope this lecture was of use, and I also would like to remind you, if you do have any games, please email them to me or send them to me somehow, and include as much information as you can, what your ratings, where the game was played, what was the time control, and how long did you spend on each move. The more information I have, the more I can understand the psychology of what was happening in the game. And so few players respect the fact that half of the game is just sheer psychology, not just technique and understanding. It's just simple concepts of time management, understanding simple rules like the one I just showed you. And so please, again, send me those games. I'll be happy to look at them, and I appreciate you taking the time to watch my videos. And please watch the rest of them. Hopefully you'll find them instructive. Thank you.